The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for this day.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Hey, business owners, we know you know the importance of maximizing every dollar. With the Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business American Express card, you can make your expenses work just as hard as you. From afternoon coffee runs to stocking office supplies and even team dinners, you can earn miles on all your business expenses. Plus, you can earn 125,000 bonus miles for a limited time through October 29th. The Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business Card. If you travel, you know. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply. Offer ends October 29th, 2025.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game of me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran McGuire. Kieran, it's too early in the morning for you to make me laugh with cartoon antics, as you count me in.
I was summoning my inner Ted Rogers.
We've all got an inner Ted Rogers. It was a very good 3-2-1. For those of you, there won't be many people listening to this who are too young to know Ted Rogers, but he hosted, I think, arguably the most baffling TV quiz show there ever was.
Yes.
I think if Sherlock Holmes had been a contestant, he probably would have been booted out around. And obviously, if they had 2 weeks running where somebody accidentally won a prize, they would make it even more baffling. And if you didn't win, you got a ceramic miniature dustbin. That's how television was in those days. It's Newsday. We are recording on Wednesday as usual, but we're recording slightly early in the morning because I keep saying logistical reasons. But mainly when I say logistical reasons, it means Kieran's got some work, but we both have. We both have today, and I'd say looking suitably autumnal, Kieran. It's very...
Yes. I took Finley out this morning. And because it's been windy for the last few days, there has been a huge flock of acorns on the little forest that we go through. And walking on acorns is a wonderful experience. You really do feel proper country living.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in country matters, Kieran, but I have watched Chris Packham occasionally. He's, as you know, not my favourite person.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it's not a flock of acorns.
What is the collective for acorns?
I don't think there is a... Is there a collective noun for non-physical? I mean, obviously they're physical. You can touch it. I don't know. I'd go for a carpet of acorns, but
Yeah, could be.
It does break my heart. I went for a walk yesterday because the marathon march coming up. There's still a part of me. I'm walking through this wonderful park near Crystal Palace. There's all these conkers just lying there. Just lying there. And there's part of me thinking, what are the kids thinking today?
Political correct has gone wrong.
I mean, I'm sure the Xbox 4 is very good, but there's conkers just lying there for the taking. You don't have to throw sticks into the tree anymore. And we've got a lot of news to get through, Kieran, so perhaps we shouldn't have waffled off about the collective noun for acorns wasn't how I was expecting to start this pod. Just very briefly, Kieran, in passing, because we haven't had time to digest this huge news, which was announced this morning. Crystal Palace being fined €10,000 for displaying a UEFA Mafia banner. All I will say, Kieran, before we give this story the gravitas it deserves, probably next week, maybe a whole pod, I don't know, is if UEFA are listening, I don't think €10,000 is enough of a deterrent. I suspect so. When the Conference League starts proper, I don't suspect the boys will be going, we better not display that banner again. We'll just have to. The world will have to make up its own mind whether you're UEFA are corrupt or not. That I think that banner may well grow in the telling. There's two potentially massive stories to start with this week, Kieran. And the first one, obviously, I was expecting until 2 days ago that Chelsea would have been the first story, but it seems increasingly that football rivalries these days, Kieran, are happening because of court cases, not because of things that happen on the pitch. So, Palace and Forest fans are not the best of friends at the moment, and now Burnley and Everton fans probably won't be liking each other for the foreseeable future. A strange story, Kieran, that seemed almost to have come out of nowhere, but has been going on for a long time because you predicted this could happen.
Yes, Burnley were relegated in season 21-22. They finished 18th in the Premier League, and they finished 4 points below Everton. Everton stayed up on merit. However, the Premier League subsequently, as we know, charged Everton for a breach of PSR, and Everton were given a 6 points deduction in season 22-23. Burnley's argument is that had the points deduction been applied in the year in which the offence took place, Burnley would have survived and Everton would have been relegated. And therefore, they are putting in for compensation of around about £50 million, is our understanding. If you take a look at the accounts, Burnley went from a £12 million profit in the Premier League to an £18 million loss in the Championship the following season. So there was quite a turnaround, and they said, well, we would have made profits had we stayed in the Premier League. So that's the position. How is this going to pan out? I think there are a variety of directions that both the prosecution and the defence will take. Burnley's case will be, let's take a look at the Carlos Tevez, the legendary 2005. Tevez signed for West Ham. He scored in the last 2 or 3 games. West Ham stayed up. Sheffield United were relegated. And it turns out that Carlos Tevez shouldn't have been playing for West Ham due to third-party ownership. And this one took about 4 years to resolve. And it resulted in West Ham paying £18 million in compensation. Now, that's £18 million in 2009, when £18 million was a lot of money. I appreciate I'm being facetious there, but compared to where we are in 2026, there has been a significant increase in Premier League revenues and so on. So that's why the Burnley claim is going to be that much higher. Did Everton achieve a sporting advantage? You can't prove it, because you could argue that Everton went out and bought a load of rubbish players with the additional money. What we will do is, I think the legal phrase is loss of a chance or loss of a probability. And we also saw in a dispute between Derby County and Middlesbrough, when Derby had unusual accounting practices, which resulted in them getting a points deduction. Middlesbrough said, had that been applied in the year in which it was occurred, we would have got into the playoffs instead of Derby, and Middlesbrough got compensation for that as a result. So there are some precedents here that will be employed as far as Burnley's legal briefs are concerned. What is Everton's defence? Everton's defence was, at the time, as far as they were concerned, you couldn't be subject to points deductions in season because that seemed to be the case at the time. The Premier League has tightened up its rule book since. Also, you couldn't prove that Everton would have breached the rules at the time for 2 reasons. The accounts wouldn't have been audited in season. And also, if we go and look at our very good friend Nick DeMarco in his successful defence for Leicester City, he said, if Everton had got to sort of say the start of June in 2022, and they knew that they were in breach, and they knew that they were subject to a points deduction potentially that season, they would have simply sold a couple of players. So, it's the old issue is that, if I had a time machine, would I go back in time and change something in my life? Whilst that might be tempting, it could involve 1,000,001 ramifications, some of which would be positive and some of which would be negative. So Everton say, well, we would have simply sold players, and therefore we wouldn't have breached the rules, and therefore that this case is spurious. So it's going to take a wee bit of time. This is the opportunity for the lawyers to put forward the case on both sides. It's going to be expensive, as we know from historical experience, and I suspect it's going to take a wee bit of time for a resolution.
I shall mention this, Kieran. Time Machine, when we were doing Never Mind the Buzzcocks, and I won't tell you which member of Take That it was. All I will say is he was the least bright member of Take That, which doesn't really narrow it down. But I can't even remember the context, but one of the questions was, what would you do with a time machine? And he said, I'd beat the traffic. Which was that was the reaction of all of us. He said, "Yeah, I'd use it to avoid traffic jams." I said, "Well,
have you heard of sat nav?"
It took a long time to explain that there are many other things he could do with it. There are two things, Kieran, that are puzzling me about this news story. First of all, as you said, the Tevez one took 4 years to resolve. This one has taken 4 years to come to court. Now, I know there are some journalists saying that one of the reasons that is because Burnley have been talking to Everton. Burnley's lawyers and Everton's lawyers have been talking for a year, and Burnley's lawyers have been taking that time to assure themselves that there is a case to answer and that there will be a positive outcome. So I'd be interested in your views on why it's taken so long for them to make this decision. But also, what I don't understand is that it revolves around the fact that the Premier League rules meant that Everton couldn't be punished in the season. So what I don't understand is why Burnley aren't trying to seek compensation from the Premier League rather than from Everton, because it's the Premier League rules that are effectively are what stopped Burnley staying up. Because if that points deduction had been applied in that season, they would have stayed up. But I in a way, I can't quite see how it's Everton's fault, if you see what I mean. I can't quite see why it's Everton who should be paying them compensation rather than the Premier League.
Yeah, I think those are both valid questions. Have lawyers been talking to each other? Potentially they have, because again, if we go back to the Middlesbrough and Derby, and also the Wycombe Wanderers and Derby issues, and from my understanding is that there was a settlement made there as well. This was all sort of done without having to go to formal mediation, arbitration, commission hearing, and so on. So it's when you can't resolve things. It's a bit like a divorce, I would imagine. If you can sort out things, then you don't have to go to court and sort of start shouting at people and so on. When I got divorced, my wife's paper said he's weird. that formed part of the case, and I couldn't really deny it.
You walked in with a spreadsheet under your arm.
That's
and
right.
The judge took one look at you and went, "Yeah, well, fair enough. Okay."
Yeah, he says that shirt doesn't go with that tie.
It's a Brighton shirt with a tie. What's he doing?
Exactly. So I think there is it's when you can't meet some form of resolution. And also it has to be said, we might not find out the outcome of this for a long period of time, because there's no obligation. This is ultimately a dispute between two parties. So So it could be that we won't find this out until the accounts are published by one of those clubs.
Oh.
And it says there was a significant transaction involving a legal settlement, something bland like that, which might appear in the accounts if the numbers are big. In terms of the rules, I do think that Everton perhaps have a degree of a case here, because they weren't obliged to submit their accounts until the following year. Would they, should they have known that they were in breach of PSR? It's not for me to say during the season. It could be that they were advised that they probably were in breach, and they were trying to sell a player, but they didn't manage to get that player sold by the 30th of June, and they will argue that they've subsequently taken their punishment. So it's a tricky one. It's a complicated one, but I suspect fans. I don't detect a lot of hostility between Burnley and Everton fans. I think they've both been through some trials and tribulations since, and that they've probably moved on. But I think if the settlement is announced, we might see some conversation. But when that's going to appear and whether that's going to be published in the domain is a separate issue.
We know, Kieran, how expensive these things are. We've been told by the people who are mainly the cause of the expense, the lawyers. But Burnley, you'd imagine, must have some confidence in the outcome, because they'll be spending a lot of money to achieve this outcome. And the chances are that if the outcome isn't achieved, they could end up paying for the whole thing. So they must be reasonably confident, you'd think. And also, do you think... Are we seeing this is not a precedent, because obviously it's happened before, but do you think we're seeing more and more that clubs are going to be going, let's have a look at a way out, let's see if we can get some money out of this situation, see if we can start a dialogue? Because I haven't got a dog in this fight. I have no feelings for either Burnley or Everton, but it's just unpleasant, really. I know how annoying the whole thing was with Palace and UEFA. It just this little background hum in the back of your mind for 3 months, which it could be 4 years in the back of the mind of Burnley and Everton fans. So it just worries me a little, Kieran.
Yes, because it's noticeable that it is Burnley and Everton that are involved in this, because initially there was a case which involved, I think it was Burnley, Leicester and Leeds United, and I think one other club that was relegated that season as well. And I think Leicester and Southampton, they both dropped out because they realised that even if Everton had been given a 6-point deduction in 21-22, they would have still been relegated. So why go to the legal cost? The case of Leeds was slightly more nuanced, and I think this sort of brings into play what you were hinting at. Leeds finished one place below Everton, so therefore that cost them £3.5 million in prize money. Now, it could be that they had a word with their lawyers, and the lawyer said, well, it's going to cost you probably 2 or 3 million in legal costs, and you've got a 50-50 chance of winning it. Do the sums and do the maths. In the case of Burnley, if there is a £50 million claim, and I think that's the amount of the claim. Now, certainly that I've seen a similar case which has not gone into the public domain, so I have to be very careful what I say, where somebody was asked on a probability basis to say, if this had happened, implications for the club's results and so on. And the settlement was agreed on, yes, the maximum you could have got from avoiding relegation or being promoted, well, let's say 40 million, but you had a 30% chance of that, so 40 million times 30%, that gives us a figure of 12 million. And that's the amount of the settlement. So that was a case that has not come to public consumption. I'll say no more than that. So these are the ways that things can be resolved.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout, the one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
The story that I thought was going to be our headline story, Kieran, involves Chelsea. It involves many conspiracy theories from football fans who are saying, what's the point? Chelsea are untouchable like Man City, and this will just end with not even a slap on the wrist. But it seems to the outside eye, i.e. me, that this is a big story with, again, potential ramifications for other clubs in the future.
Yes. Chelsea have been subject to 74 charges from the Football Association. And I think it's important to note that this is from the Football Association. They could be subject to similar charges from the Premier League in due course. So I think we have to separate out the prosecution here. And these broadly relate to offshore payments being made, for want of a better phrase, third parties. I think Eden Hazard and Willian, the transfers of those players, have been sort of hinted at. And it would appear that payments may have been approved by somebody at Chelsea to offshore bank accounts and therefore have not gone through the books and therefore could have implications from a PSR point of view. From the FA's point of view, the FA don't care about PSR. It's not their domain. This is more to do with the fact is that they need a record of all payments that have been made, and these weren't necessarily made. So that's what has happened. The players are innocent. If there are any tax implications, settlements have been made already. So the players are, they're blissfully unaware. This really does appear. And certainly there were stories coming out of Manchester of allegations of somebody connected to Eden Hazard wanted a big payment to an offshore bank account, and Manchester United turned around and said, look, we're a PLC. We're listed on the New York Stock Exchange. We can't possibly get involved in things like that. So that's where we are now. As far as Chelsea are concerned, Chelsea are certainly briefing that they don't think that they've done very much wrong. They're also saying that they became aware, or rather the new owners, Clearlake Capital, became aware of these payments during the due diligence phase of the acquisition of Chelsea, when Chelsea were effectively being owned by the UK government. And it looks as if, as a result of that, they held back between 100 and 150 million pounds in the fee that they paid across. Some people are saying this is to do with Roman Abramovich. Can he be called to the commission hearing? No, he can't. He's not involved in football anymore, and this is an FA case. The Chelsea head honcho at the time, Marina Graverskaya, she's no longer in football, so she can't be questioned. What I find strange about Graverskaya is that people are saying, well, did she sanction these payments? The simple answer is we don't know, and we may never know. She was given a £35 million payoff by Chelsea, by the Chelsea new owners in 21-22. So if this is the bit which confuses me a little bit. If Clearlake were aware of these payments being made and they believe that these payments were being sanctioned by a high-ranking Chelsea official, it does seem strange that two members of the old Chelsea board, between them, were given £50 million in payoffs by the new organisation. But the rationale behind that is something which is beyond me. It just, as you're saying, it niggles. It just doesn't quite fit with all that's taking place. So that's where we are. Could there be points deductions? I think it would be unusual for the FA to get involved in points deductions for this, but it certainly is feasible. Could there be subsequent action from the Premier League? Yes, there could. Chelsea are saying, we've reported ourselves, so that's mitigation. It's a bit like if you know you've done something wrong, go to a police station and say, I've done something wrong, and that will work on your behalf in any subsequent prosecution. So that can certainly help. And I think the story that Chelsea are also putting out, which is an interesting one, which could form part of the Manchester City defence, yes, we may have breached the rules, but even if we had breached the rules, we still believe that we were within the PSR limits. So therefore, we didn't have a breach of those particular issues. So any sporting sanctions on the pitch shouldn't apply.
I don't think Chelsea fans will be losing any sleep, Kieran, because we know from recent experience that the FA will nose this up somehow. I almost think it's quite ballsy of the FA to go. Oh, well, we've had a really bad run of luck, haven't we, in the court? So why don't we take on one of the richest clubs in the world? See how that goes, basically. Two things. I know Chelsea's saying that they self-reported and that therefore should be taken into consideration. They've been in charge of the club for quite some time now, Kieran. It's been 4 years since they took over, so it's taken a while for them to self-report. And secondly, when we talk about third parties here, is this similar to the Tevez situation when there was a kind of ownership thing where the players were kind of owned by a cooperative, for want of a better word, or does third parties relate to something completely different here in this case?
Yeah, I think to be fair to Clearlake, when it came to the self-reporting, these were issues which they discovered during the due diligence, so back in 2021, 2022. And they brought these to the attention of the government agencies at the time. So therefore they say, well, we reported ourselves 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah, in regard of your second question, there is a difference. The Tevez issue was third-party ownership. I was trying to not mention that the payments were probably to agents by Chelsea.
Right.
So when I said third parties, yeah. But yeah, certainly the fingers have been pointed at agents and other intermediaries, as far as bringing players to the club is concerned.
Right. Okay. I just thought it's important to clarify that, because I think that your mind goes to Tevez as soon as you hear third party, basically. Unfortunately, Kieran, our third story also involves the words legal action and also involves Chelsea.
Yes, this is the case of Mikhailo Mudryk, and this is a story which is sort of seems to have come out of Ukraine itself. Mudryk has been accused of using meldonium, which that was Sharapova. She was done for that. We've seen some other players in other sports, and if found guilty, he could be subject to up to a 4-year ban from playing football. Chelsea signed him in good faith from Shakhtar Donetsk for £61 million plus £24 million in add-on fees. So under what circumstances, if any, because innocent until proven guilty, would this offence have taken place? Now, somebody is saying that he may have been given this substance on behalf of the Ukrainian Football Association whilst away on an international footballing commitment, playing for his country and so on. And therefore, should Chelsea and or Shakhtar Donetsk want, they could say, you have cost us money. because as far as Chelsea is concerned, they bought the player in good faith, and his value has collapsed in terms of where he stands at present. As far as Shakhtar Donetsk is concerned, they could say, well, we've been denied up to £24 million in add-on fees. I think this isn't a footballing show. I think it's fair to say he's probably not quite looked the value that was prescribed to him, but that's a separate discussion. And it goes back to our probabilities discussion that we had earlier. I've got a lot of sympathy with anything to do with Ukraine. They've had a pretty poor World Cup campaign as well, so it looks as if they could miss out on qualifying for 2026. And the Football Association, which is it's living on air in terms of its ability to generate revenues, could be the subject to this. And people will say, well, surely Chelsea shouldn't do that. Yeah, the board of Chelsea are responsible to the shareholders of Chelsea and not to the Ukrainian FA. So therefore, they've got a legal obligation to explore all eventualities.
Very interesting plan being considered by the EFL, Kieran, which I think it's fair to say the Premier League are not over the moon about.
Yes, this is something which has been discussed at chief executive level. I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of enthusiasm for it, and it's to expand the playoffs. It's to create what we refer to as an eliminator round. And we've seen this in the National League, and we see this, I think, in rugby and other sports. So what would potentially happen is, instead of the present position, which is top two go up, third, fourth, fifth and sixth compete for one promotion place, what you will have instead is that the playoffs will be extended down to eighth position, and you will have a pre-playoff match, which is eighth versus fifth and sixth versus seventh. What's the logic? What's the benefit to this? Well, it means that you've got something to play for more clubs, because it extends. If you take a look at last season's table, I think Millwall and Blackburn would have got into these rounds, but they were only a couple of points ahead of clubs like West Brom. So therefore, still going into those last 4 or 5 games, you've got more clubs that have got something to play for. If there's more jeopardy, it becomes more interesting from a fan's point of view. So that will have a positive impact upon finances because fans are more likely to attend. In theory, it will also make the quality of the football better, because you and I are both old enough to remember seasons in the Championship, or for in my case seasons in League One and League Two, where you're 13th or 14th with 8 or 9 games to go. You're not going to go up, you're not going to go down, and everybody's at the beach, including the fans. So this will reduce the number of dead rubbers. I think that's good for football. So those are the positives. The negatives is it really good from a footballing point of view? If we take a look at the Championship table last season, the side that finished 8th was 24 points behind the side that finished 3rd, and yet they both have a chance of getting to the Premier League. Would it also potentially, and I think this is the Premier League's concern, the Premier League are twitchy that the clubs coming up from the Championship seem to be falling back down again too quickly, too often. If you have a club which in the previous season has lost 19 games or 20 games in the Championship, they're just going to be unable to compete in the Premier League unless they do spend an awful lot of money, or unless there's been a complete transformation of the club. So they're concerned about the quality of the product should these clubs be promoted. It has to be said that if you do finish 8th, you've got a much harder route of succeeding in the playoffs. But clubs find a bit of form in time, or a player comes back from injury on time, or one of those sides that finished 3rd or 4th does get an injury in the first playoff game. It can work both for and against.
I think international. I think York finished about 20 points ahead of Oldham, who ended up getting promoted. Which, see, this is my issue. I'm kind of with the Premier League on this. I don't think a team that finishes 8th in a league deserves a chance to get promoted. I understand the argument about it extends the season, and so it makes it more exciting for the rest of us. But it's a league for a reason. Basically, you finish 8th for a reason. And the thing is, of course, if you finish, imagine you've been 11th all season. You have a brilliant end of the season. The last 3 games, you end up in 8th. The adrenaline gets you through to Wembley and you win. And then, but in terms of extending the season, that's the other issue as well, because presumably this would mean that the Championship playoff, the so-called richest game in the world, that would be a week later, I presume, which means that if the team that finishes 8th did win that, they would have even less time to prepare for the Premier League. And the other issue that the Premier League are indicating is that it means that there's more chance of a team that doesn't fulfil all the Premier League criteria gets into the Premier League. A smaller team, perhaps, who finishes 8th, who overachieves, they're in the Premier League, and suddenly they have to fork out for the upgrade to broadcasting stuff, to stadiums, and so on.
Yep. Yeah, I get that, but at the same time, Luton managed it, and Bournemouth, when the first time they went up, they managed it despite having a ground which was a bit rickety in places, because you do get that money from the Premier League, and yes, you've got to go work your trolleys off to have that track. It's what we'd call a nice problem in the world of football, from the recipient's point of view. I can understand the Premier League having reservations, though. I think that the EFL would have to come up with some form of solution in the sense that those eliminator games, perhaps they should be 1 leg as opposed to 2, and that could speed up the process, and you could still perhaps get everything done. It would involve 4 matches in 14, 15 days, but if you put the Championship playoff final to the bank holiday Monday, that could work. I mean, is this also going to be extended to League 1 and League 2?
Yeah, that was one.
Because otherwise it seems a bit crazy.
Yeah,
it's to have inconsistent rules within the organisation itself.
Yeah, I would still argue that the team that finishes 3rd should go straight to Wembley. The idea that the 3rd place team has to play the 8th place, whatever. I'd like the playoffs a lot more if the 3rd place team got an advantage that they should get. Now we've got 2 stories from. Oh, hello, he's gone. Was that you? Was that your tummy growling? Or
no, it was the dog.
All right. Tell Finley shouldn't be going out in the wind. He hasn't got the ears for the wind.
True.
2 stories from Scotland, Kieran. Good news stories, but look at one about the country and one about one of the Scottish clubs.
Yes, we had Neil Doncaster very kindly came back to have a chat with us a couple of months ago, and one of the things which Neil is always keen to promote is the popularity of football in Scotland. Well, for the 3rd season in a row, Scotland is the country which generates the most interest in football in terms of attendances. 18.5 people per 1,000 attended matches at weekends in Scotland, and this was also part of a broader discussion in terms of the broadcast rights. Neil's argument is that by not broadcasting every game, there's actually an incentive for people to go along and watch live matches, and that does appear to be drawn out from the figures as well. If we compare that to England, in England it's 6.97. So I thought, this looks like a little bit of a spreadsheet opportunity for me. Last season, the average attendance in the Premier League was 40,809. An incredible achievement. Because we're old enough to remember from way back when. I can remember when Brighton were in the old First Division, which is the equivalent of the Premier League, playing in front of crowds of less than 10,000. But after 2 or 3 seasons, football wasn't a good place to be at times. So it's up to 40,809. Now, if the enthusiasm for football in England matched that of Scotland, the average attendance, and here using the word average, would have to be 108,316 to match the passion that Scottish fans have for attending football matches, and getting those into the Vitality on a Saturday afternoon, I think could be quite a challenge. So I think fair play to Scottish fans. They overall 3.9 million Scottish fans attended matches last year. Or 3.9 million fans attended matches in Scotland. That's the 8th highest in Europe for what is still a relatively small country. So you've got to give them a lot of applause. And people will say, "Well, hold on, a lot of that is driven by the 2 Glasgow clubs." Yeah, I'm not denying that, but they're still turning up.
Well, it is a lot of that in every league is driven by the big clubs. So I've always found that a spurious argument. But also good news, Kieran, and there was a time when we didn't think we'd be saying this for Inverness Caledonian Thistle.
Yes, ICT have exited administration. They have found a new owner, local businessman Alan Savage. He has been connected to the club sort of historically, and I think he's been hinting, but he's managed to come to an agreement with the administrators in terms of a price. ICT did get a significant point section. I think it was 12 or 15 when they went into administration, which was quite a few months ago. The good news from Mr. Savage's perspective is he's preserving the jobs which currently exist. There will have been job losses under the administrators, sadly. He is only buying the assets of ICT, which is good from his point of view. The downside of that is that the creditors of the old company, they won't get 100% of what's owed to them under the fact that it was losing money. And I think he's got a few ideas. He wants to do more things at the stadium itself. I think he's planning a little bit of real estate investment, perhaps close by, and try to broaden the revenue base of the club so that we don't end up in this situation again.
Now, Kieran, there's no easy way for me to say this, but I've been reminded at Selhurst Park this season by the singing of 20,000 Palace fans that your team are yet to win a major trophy. It's not something that was ever on my mind, but you step into Selhurst Park and you go, "Oh yeah, no, you're right. I have never seen Brighton win the cup." Also, I should point out to Palace fans that cup and fuck don't actually rhyme. But there you are. It's more of an assonance than a rhyme, but there you go. But there is an achievement for your boys in a way, because one of your team has become, and I believe for the first time ever, a member of a board football clubs in 3 different continents.
That's right. The hardest working man in football, Paul Barber, or Paul Barber OBE, as he's normally referred to.
By him,
yes. He has joined the board of Melbourne Victory now. Paul was previously the chief executive of Vancouver Whitecaps in MLS. He then joined Brighton about 12 years ago. He is extremely good at his job. We had this discussion that he's now become a sort of the second largest shareholder in Brighton. That's because they don't want to lose him. It's as simple as that. And without, this isn't a Brighton-centric program. For anybody that's ever sent an email to Paul Barber, normally, you normally do these things out of anger rather than sanity. You will have no doubt received a 2,000-word reply within a few hours. I have never known somebody to engage with fans to the same extent as Paul. I've got a lot of admiration for him. And also, I think we discussed this very briefly when he came on the show, when we were discussing the regulator, his involvement in the mentoring charity. It should get a huge amount of applause. There are huge issues with adolescent males in this country at present. And Paul, who by his own admission could have gone down a different track, but somebody spotted him and took him under their wing for mentoring of lost souls. I think there's a huge amount of applause that needs to go to that, and also far more support needs to come to it from local and central government and people that care about the young people of today.
This episode is sponsored by Friskies, who would like to tell your cats hi. Now, if that didn't get your cat's attention, there is one thing that always does the trick. Just pour some Friskies crunchy food in the bowl and you'll hear those paws come running. Works every time. With so many Friskies choices, you can always bring your cats running from their secret napping spots. There's always more to explore. See for yourself at friskies.com or visit your local store.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
I can say from experience, sadly, Kieran, as the trustee of Palace for Life, that it's a massive issue. We can't recruit mentors fast enough. There aren't enough of them out there. There are far more young people needing help than there are people able to help at the moment. So congratulations to Paul Barber for that. I would say Steve Parish is very good at responding to emails, but normally fewer than 2,000 words. Quite often fewer than 5 words. I presume he's joined the board of Melbourne Victory because it's part of Tony Bloom's group, is it?
That's right, yeah. Tony Bloom owns 19% of Melbourne Victory because he has got family connections in Australia. It's not part of an MCO. I think what they will be simply doing is sort of what we call at business school a knowledge exchange. I.e., have you ever thought of doing this? I can't see Paul Barber flying across for meetings.
Well, talking of Brighton connections with clubs, Kieran, it brings us to Union Saint-Gilloise, who we interviewed their CEO just a few weeks ago, and his excitement about their achievement at winning the Belgian League for the first time in decades and getting into the Champions League. And now I started watching the Arsenal game last night because I had a bit of time. Sod this, I'm going to watch PSV against USG. Yeah. What an achievement! The first game back in the Premier League, first game ever in the Champions League. They won 3-1 in the country next door, and there was a wonderful shot of our man weeping in the director's box. So that's a brilliant story with a Brighton connection, Kieran.
Yes. The relationship has cooled. Tony Bloom has divested his shares, but him and Alex go back a long way, and I'm sure that Tony will have sent him a congratulatory tweet or two, or WhatsApp message or two.
Yeah. The revolving door continues on its way at Bramall Lane, Kieran, and Chris Wilder finds himself back inside at Sheffield United, managing them. But it seems he wants some changes to their recruitment model.
Yes. By all accounts, I think he got a very, very raw deal.
Yeah,
Sheffield United, going back to the playoffs, they got 90 points last season, and the side finishing 6th got 66. So it was a huge achievement, and under normal circumstances, they probably would have been promoted directly. They were subject to a 2 points deduction themselves for financial breaches, so that's why it's there's an element of football finance involved. And by all accounts, he was dismissed from his role because the owners, COH Sports, they wanted to switch to a data-driven algorithmic recruitment model, and for whatever reason they felt that Chris Wilder wasn't. I like Chris Wilder. He played for Brighton for one season. He was the perfect example of a committed footballer.
Dirty, you mean?
No. If he went into a tackle, he'd take everything out. The ball at times, the player at times, the referee at times, the first 3 rows of the seats as well. But he was decent, committed football. So he was dismissed, and instead they They recruited Ruben Selles, whose record of played 5, lost 5, and then last Friday night conceded 5 at Ipswich led to his downfall. Chris is a passionate Blades fan himself. I think this brings into play the idea of data-driven or using data as a means of recruitment. I often will get contacted by people to say, can you give me some data on a football club? And I'll send them some of my existing spreadsheets. And they say, why do you do that? Because it's taken you years to put that together. And people are stealing. Well, not stealing, because I'm gifting it to them. Yeah. So why are you doing that? And to which my reply is, if I give you a piano, it doesn't make you a piano player. So understanding the data and understanding the algorithms, I think, is the skill that people need. And I think some clubs are fooled into thinking that they go into a meeting with 2 or 3 guys who have got snappy spreadsheets, a really good PowerPoint presentation showing this is what we can do to identify players for you, and you get blinded by science, as Thomas Dolby was inclined to say. Another one there for you kids. And as a consequence, you buy into these systems. But if you don't have the staff who are familiar with them, not just understanding the data, but how to apply the data, you're just wasting your time. And you're wasting money as well. And I think it was sad that it led to Chris Wilder's dismissal. But I wish him all the best. He is he's a proper football guy. As a fan.
What I don't quite understand about this, Kieran, this will be costing Sheffield United a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to pay off a manager when you get rid of him. It costs a lot of money to bring a new manager in. And then you're paying him off again only weeks into his contract. So it makes you wonder, when they approach Chris Wilder again, whether he says, well, I love the club, I'll come back, but I want a clear indication of what you consider success. Because the way Sheffield United are going, if they're still in the lower half of the table at Christmas, they could sack him again. The big question for me, if Chris Wilder was given a big payoff package when he left only a few weeks ago, does he now have to give that back now he's been re-recruited by the club, or will they have brought him back on maybe a lesser package than they would have done had he not already been sacked and been paid a lot of money, if you see what I mean?
Well, I did half expect this question, so I contacted one of our sports lawyer friends. And I think you know what the answer is to this. It depends.
Right,
I mean, Chris Wilder, he was under contract, so therefore Sheffield Wednesday did have an obligation to pay him money. At the same time, he has an obligation to try to find work. The fact that he's now found work at Bramall Lane is one which I don't think anybody would have necessarily predicted.
Yeah.
I suspect that if he had an initial lump sum payoff, he'll be able to keep that. In terms of ongoing payments, they will be effectively transferred as part of his new remuneration package. Certainly when I was listening, I think I was listening in on TalkSport, they seem to think that he's got a good deal because he's actually in a very strong position from a negotiating point of view. If Sheffield United go down to the League One football deal, that means a reduction in broadcast rights from £8 million to around about 1.8. So it's a substantial reduction. If I was negotiating on behalf of Chris Wilder, I would have clauses in the contract to make sure that there's a significant bonus for avoiding relegation and so on.
You'll be able to keep saying Sheffield Wednesday, Kieran, in our next story, our penultimate story. You will have to explain this one to me, Kieran, because I'm struggling to get my head around this. And we saw a very rare occurrence last night of away fans outnumbering home fans in the Sheffield Wednesday Grimsby Carabao Cup game, which Grimsby won to continue their good run. in the Carabao Cup, which will hopefully be ended at Wembley by Palace. Although I'm not sure we've got room in our trophy cabinet for this Carabao Mickey Mouse thing. But this, I can't quite understand what happened here. But all I know is that Sheffield Wednesday offered Grimsby Town 2,000 extra tickets because of the demand from Grimsby fans, but conditionally.
Yes. So Sheffield Wednesday were drawn at home to Grimsby Town. Sheffield Wednesday fans are boycotting, effectively using the support the team, not the regime approach, which not dissimilar to that of Blackpool and the not a penny more approach, which many Blackpool fans took a few years ago due to the ownership of the Oyston family. So the rationale is, when you are in the ground, if you are going to a match, don't spend any money on catering, don't do. And I absolutely understand that. At the same time, the catering staff, they might have to be slimmed down. So there are there's no clear-cut victory for any of the parties involved. I believe that Grimsby initially sold, I think, 4,000 tickets, and then they went back to Sheffield Wednesday and says, look, Hillsborough is a big capacity ground. Could we have up to a further 2,000? And here's an application of what we sometimes refer to as Chancery-nomics from the Sheffield Wednesday owner, Dejon Chancery. He said, we'll give you 2,000 tickets, but you have to pay for all 2,000 effectively up front. So if you sell one ticket and don't sell the other 1,999, it's on you, Grimsby Town, to pay me. This is indicative of the fact that he is desperate for money. Sheffield Wednesday are in a financially precarious position, and we've got payroll another 10. I think they're probably okay for September payroll, but as you get further into the season, things will start to get squeakier in terms of bum time. To be fair to Grimsby, they said, yes, we want to do this. We want to reward our fans following the victory against Manchester United. And the Grimsby fans said, we want the tickets, so they managed to sell all 2,000. But it is indicative of financial risk. I've got to be honest, whilst this has been highlighted for Sheffield Wednesday, this strategy is not uncommon in football when it comes to sale of tickets to away fans. Now, in the case of Sheffield Wednesday, if they hadn't been sold to Grimsby, nobody would have bought them.
Yeah.
But quite often, if you look at the Premier League rules, the away allocation is the lower of 3,000 or 10% of capacity. It could be that let's say that Bournemouth are playing at Newcastle, so Bournemouth would be entitled to 3,000 tickets. It gets changed to 12:30 on a Saturday. Newcastle say, well, you can have up to 3,000 tickets, and Bournemouth say, well, we probably aren't going to bring 3,000. What happens under those circumstances? Initially, Newcastle will say, look, we'll give you these two blocks. That's 1,000 tickets. If you want two more blocks, you've got to pay for them, because we could sell them to Newcastle fans. So that's where the situation is different. If the away fans aren't going to take up the allocation and the tickets could be sold to home fans, I don't have any objection to the home team saying you have to pay for everything, even if you don't sell them all. But this is very different.
So the trouble with that argument is it deters Grimsby fans from buying a ticket then, the 2,000, because they go, well, there's a chance that if we don't sell all 2,000, I won't be going, so why should I buy a ticket and take that risk, which is that was probably never going to happen given the role that Grimsby are on. But Sheffield Wednesday are trying to argue now that it was nothing to do with Chancery-nomics. It was all to do with the fact that there was no point opening an extra section unless it was full, because the money that they would have to spend on stewards and policing would be if they only sold 1,000 tickets and they had to still get all those extra stewards and police, that would take the money. That would be it spent. That seems to be their logic.
Yeah, and I understand that to a degree. It should also be noted that you probably don't need as many police and stewards in the home area because it's being boycotted by the home fans.
Interesting as well, Kieran, that Grimsby Town supporters groups and Sheffield Wednesday supporters groups were in conversation about where they could go in the city rather than spend. They said, we don't want to get to the ground early and spend money in the ground because we want to support your boycott. So tell us the pubs and the chip shops we should be going to, which, as you say, perfectly understandable. And I know a lot of Grimsby fans were going to wear yellow shirts in solidarity with Sheffield Wednesday anyway. But that's quite a lot of income. I mean, if you got, I think it was 6,500 Grimsby fans in the end. If they're not drinking in the ground, that's quite a substantial bit of income loss for Sheffield Wednesday Football Club, isn't it?
It is. But Dejon Chansiri has to accept the consequences of his actions, his intransigence when it comes to selling the club, and his inability to negotiate a fair price for the Sheffield Wednesday, which needs to be saved, needs to be preserved.
He won't be moved, will he? It's just... It's
very stubborn.
We're in that Reading situation where you just go, what Morecambe, what are you waiting for? Because it's him that's suffering. Well, Sheffield Wednesday fans are suffering, but in the end, it's him that's suffering. It's his bank account that's suffering with each day that goes by that he won't sell the bloody club.
Yes, absolutely. But football owners and stubbornness are quite a common feature.
Yeah. Our last story, Kieran, as you know, it's a long time since I was involved in human resources. It wasn't even called human resources then. It's called personnel. But I don't think I'd be too happy with the judge in this. I mean, it's a funny story, Kieran, and it's not necessarily financial, but it's worth a mention.
It is. This is an employment tribunal, an employment judge called Judge Daniel Wright. And he actually refers to a case brought by a Maya Kalina, who applied for a job and was rejected from the job. And she said, I was being discriminated against. And she lost her case. And the judge's ruling was that there is such a thing as team fit. So if you are going to join a workplace, are you going to fit in? The Maya Kalina's team said that she didn't possess British traits, including not being outgoing, not enjoying pop culture, and not swearing enough. And I'm going, that seems really weird, because if I look at all of the jobs that I've taken in my life, I'm not outgoing, I'm not part of pop culture, and I don't swear very often. But it's never prevented me from getting a job. So that does seem a little bit... But how does this apply to football? Was that as part of the judge's rationale and reasoning for rejecting her case, he said, for example, if a Spurs fan applied for a job in a workplace which was predominantly Arsenal supporting, it could be that he could be or she could be rejected from getting that employment position due to the fact that they would not be part of the team fit. And whilst I think we would think, oh, that's great, it's a funny story and so on, there are quite chilling undertones to that if that's going to be applied more broadly, i.e., if your face or your colour doesn't fit, then we don't want you.
Well, I couldn't agree more, but on the other side of that, it makes life difficult for employers as well, because if, for example, Crystal Palace Football Club or the foundation were to only employ Palace fans, we'd be stuffed. So at least half the staff at every football club don't support that club. Certainly in the Premier League. A friend of mine is a Palace fan, who's just got a job in the Arsenal ticket office. It's not an issue. But I do worry, this idea that this definition of British traits worries me as well, Kieran, especially the idea that swearing is a British trait. It does make you wonder if those poor souls coming over on the small boats was just shouting obscenities as they landed on the beach at Dover, they'd be welcomed with open arms. It's just, it's a ludicrous one, that definition of Britishness. But you're absolutely right. That there's something almost Orwellian about that idea of team fit. Because it does give, certainly in smaller organisations, it does give employers carte blanche to say, no, face don't fit. Simple as that. And now I don't have to explain why your face doesn't fit. Don't forget, you can now, as a serious end to a pod that otherwise been quite light-hearted, Kieran. Don't forget, you can now join our Price of Football Club, where you'll get ad-free listening, bonus episodes, and much, much more. Just go to priceoffootball.com and click on Join the Club to sign up today. If you have a question you'd like answered on our weekly Tuesday questions pod, then you can email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. If you join that Price of Football Club, Kieran, you get a special questions one where you can ask topical questions. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter, X. You can find us on YouTube, and you can go to the same website, priceoffootball.com, if you'd like to buy our book. We will be back on Tuesday with our next questions episode. We've got a whole weekend of Premier League football to look forward to, Kieran. But in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Just a reminder, folks, that we are coming to Windsor Park in Belfast on the 18th of October. We are also appearing at the Amex Stadium as part of the Premier League's campaign against suicide and increasing suicide awareness on the 19th of November. So you can get tickets from Eventbrite if you want to come to the Belfast gig. We're going just to confirm our ticket details for the Brighton gig in the next week or two. There's a variety of ways you can support the show, and I think our special edition for club members went out yesterday, so that they will have picked up some extra answers to extra questions. But if you don't want to do so, I absolutely understand why. Times are tight for us all at present. There's an option which will take you 30 seconds, and you still be supporting the Price of Football. And that's to pop onto your app and to give us a review. And it doesn't matter what you say on the review. You could even say you would rather have the show presented by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Ted Rogers. I'm not quite sure how that would go, but I'd probably listen in.
There'd be some confusion on both sides of that conversation, wouldn't there? Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson going, "Why are you doing that thing with the fingers, man? What are you doing with the fingers?" Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who I believe Accrington Stanley fan. Macclesfield?
Some bizarre.
Macclesfield, yes. I think it's Macclesfield. Yeah, he came over to do a Sky Sports thing and was allocated a club to support, which for a couple of weeks he took very seriously by all accounts, and perhaps understandably lost interest. Certainly would have done by the time Robbie Savage became the manager of Macclesfield, I imagine. I'm always very good of Robbie Savage on 6060 to rule himself out of the West Ham job should Graham Potter be sacked. It's like A, Graham Potter hasn't been sacked. B, I don't think they'd be knocking and banging your door down, to be perfectly honest. I hope Graham Potter hasn't been sacked. Not until Sunday, at least, would be fingers crossed. That's a terrible. I don't want anybody to be sacked, Kieran. No, really, not even Graham Potter. I'm a big man. Even I can apologise. I apologise, Graham, if you're listening to this, and if you are listening to this, West Ham fans will be furious. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.